Now we talked about how to break apart glucose into energy, but how do you make or can your body make glucose or carbohydrates? So your body can make certain types of carbohydrates. So how do we know how to break it down? Yeah, that's what a process we call glycolysis. But actually, we're going to introduce another thing later on in this lecture. But how does the body make glucose? And we did cover this earlier in the semester. Now this term might be a little like fire up a little neurons that you are sleeping. But have you heard of this term, gluconeogenesis? Oh, it's a very big word, but again, if you know your root words, it tells you what it means. And gluconeogenesis, you have gluco for glucose, neo meaning new, genesis. So whenever you see this term in science or medicine, that means it's creating or generating something new. So what are you doing? Generating new glucose. And again, this is different from glycolysis because again, lysis means to break apart. So again, glycolysis is breaking apart, but gluconeogenesis, now you're making new glucose molecules. And how do you do that? Well, it's a complex pathway with many different intermediates, and I don't expect you to know all of this. Well, actually, let's rewind a bit. So with glycolysis, remember glycogen is a branched form of glucose, so all these glucose molecules are linked together by chemical bonds. You break apart these bonds to form individual glucose molecules. And what we covered in the previous lecture is you break down glucose and then you eventually make 3 carbon compounds, and the one we want to make for glycolysis is pyruvate. Now the interesting thing is that things like glycerol and other 3 carbon intermediates, they can actually be built back up into glucose, and this is a process we call gluconeogenesis. Now remember that with glycolysis we broke apart glucose and we actually got some energy from it. So to go the other way and go from these 3 carbon molecules and build up another glucose molecule, your body actually needs to expend energy to build up 6 carbon glucose from 3 carbon intermediates. You might see in some other familiar terms in here. Now, do I want you to memorize these exact pathways? Again, I think that's something more appropriate for upper level biochemistry course, but you notice that some of these like fructose and you might be wondering about other simple sugars. For the simple monosaccharides we can metabolize into energy, they all plug in somewhere into this whole pathway here. Where exactly, again, if you're really interested, you can look that up, but that's not something I'm really going to be concerned with in this class. Alright, so then again, glycolysis, break down, gluconeogenesis, build up. So glycogenolysis, that's a different term. So when you see glycogenolysis, it's not the same as glycolysis. Glycogenolysis breaks up that branched big macromolecule we call glycogen. Glycolysis is when you're actually breaking down the glucose, not glycogen. And again, genesis means to generate and create new stuff. So glycogenesis is not the same as gluconeogenesis. Glycogenesis is creating new glycogen, whereas gluconeogenesis is creating new glucose. So again, they all start with glyco or gluco, and they sound very similar, but they're all different they're related processes, but they have different definitions.